How's it going, everyone? Nick Templin here from Templin Scouting, and here I'm going to try and re-record the audio that I had for my mock draft video that I had recorded last night and had already uploaded, but unfortunately I realized that after my computer gave me a pop-up saying that I was low on battery. Unfortunately, that cut out my audio for the rest of the video for some reason, so hopefully that doesn't happen again. But I'm going to go ahead and just go through, probably a little bit quicker this time, each of the selections that I made, maybe just highlighting one or two of them as I go along to just kind of keep it shorter this time, and just obviously I don't need to explain Shane Wright as a selection. He's the obvious number one overall for anyone who needs a center. Yuri Slafkovsky, best winger in this draft, and they definitely need some guys to play with Hughes and Hischier there in New Jersey. Simon Nemec, great defenseman. He is definitely my third best prospect in this draft, so pretty much regardless of who's sitting here, I would have them probably selecting him. Joakim Kamel, my next best winger in the draft, somebody who can complement Matty Beniers. They could have gone winger or defense, but I just chose to go winger in this case. Philadelphia Flyers, Matthew Savoie, great speed, upside as a second line center. I think, very good offensively, needs some work on his defensive game, but overall I like him at this spot. Brad Lambert, probably my second favorite overall player in this draft. I personally think that as far as centers go, although he can also play the wing, and that's what I would expect him to do in Columbus, he's probably the second best player in this draft, but I think because of his lack of production, he's been rather underrated, and Columbus will be very happy to get him as a steal at number 6 here. But don't be surprised to see him go anywhere from 5th to 15th, as I saw in a great comment on one of my last videos, saying that he's that kind of prospect this year where he could go anywhere in that range, and I agree. It really just depends on what team feels comfortable taking him. I've got Frank Nazar going to Ottawa, good playmaking winger. Ottawa just needs to add some wingers to their top 6 to really fill out that lineup. Looking at Detroit, Logan Cooley can offer up a great second-line center option behind Dylan Larkin. People will be surprised to see him fall here, I think, but I don't think you should be surprised. I think that that is the trend that the NHL scouts are going to lean towards. I don't think that there are some that have him ranked in the top 5. I just highly doubt that any of the scouts that do have him ranked in the top 5 are scouts working for any of the teams drafting in the top 5. I think the only way we see him get drafted somewhere in there is if one of these teams from outside here trades up and goes for him there. Buffalo gets David Jiricek, another big offensive defenseman to add to the back end alongside Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin, and they start to kind of solidify a very strong core back there in Buffalo. Denton Mateychuk, defenseman that I'm a big fan of personally, and Anaheim definitely needs to fill some holes on defense after losing both Hampus Lindholm and Josh Manson last year at the deadline. Jonathan Lekkerimäki, good goal-scoring winger. I think he will bring in some really good chemistry alongside William Eklund right off the bat. It might be a little bit higher than you might see him go if he doesn't go to San Jose. He probably falls a decent amount, but although I could see the Islanders picking him as well. But I think the value for San Jose, it might be potentially higher, just because I do predict there to be some pretty strong chemistry between himself and William Eklund. Moving on to Columbus, Ty Nelson, one of my favorite defensemen that I got to see this year. Physical guy. People think he's smaller than he is. He grew quite a bit during this season and the year before. So, he's a puck-moving guy, physical, great defensively, plays the quarterback on the power play. Overall, just a great value pick for Columbus here at number 12. Marco Kasper, he's kind of a do-it-all player, good on face-offs, good on penalty kill situations and stuff, getting great experience in the Swedish League this year. Just another guy to absolutely keep an eye out for in this upcoming draft, because he could fall in a number of places. It really just depends more on need for teams, whether they think they need a really high-end, potential scorer in their lineup, or if they just think they need a guy who can play center and shut down opposing teams' top centers. Then that's kind of where I see Marco Kasper fitting in. Tristan Luneau, my favorite pure defensive player in this draft, very physical and is very good at shutting down the opposition's top players. Look for him to do that potentially in the NHL. I like the fit for Winnipeg, because I think that's just a major need for them. I think that for as good as they've been offensively, they haven't given their franchise goaltender a whole lot of help on the back end. So I think that that's something that Tristan Luneau can bring to the team. Leon Bichel may be a bit high here for most people, but I've really liked what I've seen from him so far. I'm still kind of in the process of evaluating him, but I like the way that he pinches on defense, and he's got good size and good reach, good positioning on the defensive end, and definitely just fills a need for Vancouver right now, who definitely needs to add a solid, reliable defenseman to the back end. Looking at the 16th pick, I have the Buffalo Sabres selecting Cutter Gauthier from the U.S. Development Program. He's a guy that I've really liked what I've seen from so far. He might not be the most dynamic offensive player in the draft class, although he does have that upside. I think what he really brings to the table is he's a really smart hockey IQ winger, really good at killing penalties, and something that is pretty invaluable to any team in the league. And I think that once Buffalo starts bringing in more guys like this, they get to bring a bit more culture to their team and a bit of a core outside of just who their star players are. Even though they're probably still looking for their Jack Eichel replacement, I just don't think that player exists in this draft, and so that's why I have them drafting best defenseman available, and then great defensive and also solid offensive winger. Next up, Ryan Chesley to Nashville. I'll admit I haven't watched enough of Chesley to know exactly how I feel about him, but I do think that he, from what I've heard, he's a solid defensive guy. I think that he just adds more depth to Nashville's defense that could potentially use it. I think their depth on forward is fairly solid. Obviously, they don't need a goalie. Not that there are goalies in this draft, but if you're going to focus on defense, I just see him as being a really good fit for Nashville. I don't see guys like Mintyukov or Seamus Casey being that same kind of fit because they like to kind of target the guys that are really responsible defensively, and I just don't see that as much with these guys right now. Moving on to Dallas, we've got Philip Mesar. They just kind of need a guy who can be a Swiss Army knife in their offensive lineup. Just because they need to fill holes that are being left behind by Radulov when Seguin and Ben eventually leave that team, because they've been struggling for a couple of years now. They just need somebody who can come in and play any spot on the wing or center, and Philip Mesar does that all. I want to focus on somebody who plays more wing than center, though, because they obviously have a number of good center prospects coming, so I think Philip Mesar fits that mold fairly well. Moving on to Pavel Mintyukov, defenseman from the Saginaw Spirit. He's a great puck mover. Felt like everything offensively on Saginaw just kind of ran through him this year, and in the case of LA, I think in a lot of cases they don't really need a whole lot of high-end prospects right now, but what we did see from this year was one Doughty ended up going down hurt. Their defenses seemed fairly thin. Now, that being said, they're still handling their series fairly well against the Edmonton Oilers, and as of right now, they're up 3-2, so their defense is obviously still pretty solid for what it is, but you could always add another piece, and I know that Brant Clark is coming, but I don't see any reason not to add another puck moving guy to that back end. Seamus Casey for the Washington Capitals. I do like the Washington Capitals defense more than I have previously. I think guys like Faravari have stepped in and done a solid job. And obviously Nicholas Jensen is always an analytic darling, but they just need to add another guy that can help out on like a second power play unit, for example. Right now, John Carlson is the first power play unit guy, and I believe they use Orlov and Justin Schultz on the second unit. It gives them the opportunity to potentially move on from a guy like Justin Schultz and use Seamus Casey on that second power play unit, and I think he definitely has that upside as an offensive-minded defenseman, so I think he definitely fits the mold there in Washington. Next up for Pittsburgh, Isaac Howard. He's a guy that I think benefits a lot from playing with the guys that he plays with. So, despite him having a lot of points and looking really impressive in the U18s, I do expect him to fall somewhere in this range. And I think Pittsburgh is a really good location for him because he's the kind of guy who skill-wise can kind of play to the level of the guys that he's playing with, and because of that I think he could be a really good line mate to play with both Gensel and Crosby there on the top line. in Pittsburgh, and potentially, depending on how quickly they get him into the club, he might be there for one of the last runs they have with the core of Crosby, maybe Malkin. I don't know if Letang's going to stay. It'll be interesting to see this offseason, but either way, it's an offensive piece that just kind of helps Pittsburgh right now, and so I like the fit there a lot. For the Oilers, I got Kevin Korchinski here. Now, he's kind of an interesting prospect. He's a very good defensive playmaker. Like, by that I mean, doesn't matter how much pressure is on him, he's always going to make the tape-to-tape pass, which is super impressive, and he's quietly become one of my favorite defensive prospects in this draft. That being said, I know he has some work to do defensively. He needs to work on his physicality a little bit, I think, because at 6'2", and I think 180 or something like that, you would expect him at least to maybe throw the body a little bit more than he does, but from what I've seen, you just don't see it very often. He struggles from time to time with his defensive positioning, so that's something that needs to be coached into him. But I do think that, thanks to his reach and thanks to his skating and all these other attributes that he has, he can really bring it together to be a solid two-way defenseman in the league. But as of right now, his offensive ability is worth drafting him in the first round alone. Next up is the Anaheim Ducks in the pick that they got in the Hampus Lindholm trade. I have them selecting Liam Öhgren as their second pick in this first round. I really like Öhgren. He's a good Swedish goal-scoring winger, and as of right now, they can add pretty much depth in any position right now, because I thought they were going to be really solid for depth for years to come, thanks to their deep prospect pool that it seemed like they had. But some of the guys they've had have really struggled, and so there's starting to be some more spots that are opening up for more guys like a Liam Öhgren, for example. Next up, I have the St. Louis Blues selecting Vladimir Grudinin. He's another guy that I would like to see more of, but from what I have heard, he is a solid two-way defenseman, and as of right now, I think that would be the best fit for St. Louis to go after right now. I really like their depth on offense already. I really like Scott Perunovich on defense coming up, but there are some guys on defense there that are getting up there in age, namely Torrey Krug and Justin Falk, for example. So it definitely wouldn't hurt to bring in another option to really fill out that defense. Next up, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning selecting Danila Yurov. Now, a lot of people have Yurov ranked pretty high. Some have him in the top 10 or at least the top 15. I struggle with that a little bit because of his lack of production in the KHL. And I know that in the KHL, guys don't get as much playing time at this age, but he is a guy that has played 21 games in the KHL and he's yet to register a single point. Now, that being said, he has been better in the VHL, which is kind of like their minor league, not their junior league, which is the MHL, which is under 20. I don't think he's been playing in that. He's been playing in the VHL, which is kind of a step up from the junior, but a step below the KHL. And he's been better there, but even there, there's still some question marks with his game, I think. So I think he slips a little bit, and I think Tampa Bay is the best team to try and take a chance on a guy like this. And knowing them, they probably turn him into the superstar that people actually believe that he can be. But I think that really depends on the team that he lands with, and I think this would be the perfect landing spot for him, because I think if he ends up, somewhere in the top 10, anywhere in the top 10, really, I think pretty much any one of those teams probably wouldn't be able to develop him the way that he needs to be developed, and I think Tampa Bay is a team that can be patient with him. Moving on to the Rangers, I have them selecting Connor Geekie. He is a guy that a lot of people I think still overhate at this point, and yes, I have him quite a bit lower than what most people probably had him at the beginning of the season, and I get that, but I think that a lot of these prospects is more about fit than anything else. And I think when you talk about Connor Geekie, one of the biggest issues with him is his skating. I don't worry about it too much, because when he has the puck, I find that he is able to shield people off of it fairly well using his size, and he's got a cannon of a shot. So there's lots of skill there with him. He's a solid power forward, and somebody who will have success at the next level, I think. But I think that success, I think he projects better as a winger than as a center. And I think that, with the Rangers, here's a guy who has, dynamic offensive upside that they could really use in their top six, I think, to fill out, the spots that have been filled by like Dryden Hunt, for example, or, if Capo Caco doesn't, find his offensive stride, Connor Geekie might be the guy that takes his spot in the top six, for example. Moving on to pick number 27, I've got the Montreal Canadiens selecting Swedish defenseman Simon Forsmark with the pick they got in the Toffoli trade. Personally, Simon Forsmark is another guy that I'd like to watch more of and haven't gotten a chance to yet, but I know that he is a two-way defenseman from Sweden. He's a good puck mover, and I just think that that's something that Montreal really needs right now. Now, on to the next prospect, who is the one that I'm the most familiar with in this draft, which is David Goyette, as I, worked for the Wolves as a volunteer this year, and therefore got to see him for every single game of his season. And, he's a player that I really like a lot because he's not just good at like any one thing. He's, very much above average for the OHL level, at least at every single skill that you could expect from him. He's got, great offensive capabilities. He's got good hands, playmaking ability, good shooter, all those things. And it's why he was the number one rookie in scoring this year in the OHL. But then on top of that, he's really responsible in the defensive zone. Great hockey IQ in that way. He has a physical side to his game. He's good on face-offs, all these things. Just a fully great all-around player that I think could benefit Minnesota a lot. And depending on how teams really feel about him, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go much higher in the draft. I've seen rankings that have had him as high as 15, and that doesn't surprise me at all. But I do think that there are some players here. It all depends on fit, really. And that's not to say with David Goyette that he doesn't fit in most situations. I do think that he would fit on really any team in the league. It's more just going after need, and I think a lot of teams are going to be, at least after the first few are off the board, there's going to be less centers that are kind of desirable. But I could kind of see him and Marco Kasper kind of flip-flop because they're very similar players. I think David Goyette might have a little bit more skill and Marco Kasper might be a little bit more defensive, but that's kind of why I have him falling a little bit compared to what some people might think, but also some people probably have him in the early second round, and I think he's definitely a first rounder. So that's my opinion on David Goyette there. Next up for the Toronto Maple Leafs, I have them picking American winger Jimmy Snuggerud. I think that he is a pretty good offensive upside guy, another guy that I admit I would like to watch more of. But from what I have seen and what I've heard, he is a guy who definitely is good at driving the offense. And right now, just add a little bit more depth to what Toronto has. They're bringing in Matthew Knees now and Nick Abruzzese. I think I'm saying that right. I have no idea. And, usually I have them picking a defenseman here. There's not really one here that I think will, be there quick enough to help them with their kind of window of competition right now. And on top of that, I think their defense was better than we kind of give it credit for this year in a lot of ways. Not to say that they didn't have their struggles throughout the season, because they certainly did, but players like Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin were much better this year than we probably initially expected from them. So they're gonna have to probably replace Giordano in the offseason, and they're probably gonna have to replace Justin Hull in the offseason. But Riley, Muzzin I'm not a big fan of, but he still does the job. And then they've got Sandin and Liljegren, and then there's got to fill out two more spots in that defense. And maybe I'm forgetting somebody too. I can't even think of. Brody, of course. Yeah, Brody. So really, there's only one spot left to fill in that defense. I think they'll handle that in free agency right now. So wing makes the most sense to me. Arizona, we've got Luca Del Bel Belluz, one of my favorite underrated prospects in this draft. Very dynamic center from the Mississauga Steelheads, who has great hands, great playmaking ability, very raw talent. I will say that right now. He put up a lot of points for sure, but I think some of the hockey IQ things and just talent and like, or not talent because he has that, but just there's going to be some things that need to be coached into him once he gets to the next level. But I think he has all the upside of being a potential first line center in the NHL should he develop properly. And then next up, I also have them taking Yuri Kulich, another center. So I went back-to-back centers here. I like the value with both of these guys. I think Kulich can play the wing as well, which is nice. But Kulich is a very good Czech center or forward. Let's just label him as that. And he, good offensively, just responsible on both ends of the ice. I think he has a lot of upside to be a strong player in the NHL. Reminds me a lot of Martin Necas when he was coming through the Czech system. And to round this draft off, we've got the Buffalo Sabres drafting center Noah Ostlund, another fairly responsible two-way center there, just to aid with the depth of the future of that team. I know they've got a lot of centers right now, but personally I think Krebs projects as a winger to me. He can be a center. I think he's a guy who can take face-offs for you, but I think, for the most part, you can play him on the wing. Dylan Cousins, I could see him being a winger at some point as well. Doesn't matter a whole lot. You can never have too many centers in your system. It's a lot easier to teach a center to play the wing than a wing to play center. So, overall, I like the pick there for them. So you guys let me know down in the comments below what you think of my selections here. If you would like me to explain any one of my picks more, because I know I kind of went through them a bit quicker this time, just let me know. And if you like this content, please like and subscribe for more of it in the future.